Yes, sir.
You're against the American involvement in World War I. What is your vision of what would the world have been like in the 20s and 30s had we not gone into World War I?
We would not have had the Great Depression. That's number one. And we wouldn't have had the expansion of the welfare state. But you have to understand that while I'm not a pacifist, okay, economists are against war like doctors are against cancer. Okay, because we believe that you get unintended consequences you don't know. I mean, if you're not, I'll just extrapolate. Let's say we had not gone in. The British, and we had not financed the Allies, because we were financing them way before we got into it. They would have come, they would have run out of money, both the Allied powers and the Central powers, both would have run out of money by the time 6-8 months into that war. They would have had to come to terms, an agreement. We would not have inflated our currency. Remember, prices doubled in that war. In 2 years, prices doubled. 1917 and 1919, they doubled. And we never, Harding tried to bring them back down. We wouldn't have had the immense propaganda of the Creel administration. We wouldn't have had the flu epidemic. We wouldn't have had the Great Depression. That Great Depression was brought about by that inflation when they inflated bank credit. The Fed inflated bank credit to do it. We wouldn't have had the building of major bureaucracies. One of the best books to read on is Crisis and Leviathan by an author by the name of Higgs. And so when you get involved in these things, okay, always remember there's unintended consequences. And so as an economist, I would look at that and said, listen, let's pass. Let's pass. And this whole concept that was put out, the propaganda, was put out by the New York financial establishment about the Germans invading the United States, and they had people standing in buildings with goggles looking for German airplanes. I mean, those planes didn't have a range of more than 100 miles. I mean, nuts. You know, and the stuff that was put out, the propaganda and that, by the Creole and the rest of them, when you look back on it. Now, I'm presently writing a book on this, the subject of what's happened today. And I said the first 100 years, 1815 to 1914, the age of classical liberalism, the age of expanding freedoms, better technology. This, what started in 1914, and will probably end, I hope, in 2012, is the age of progressivism. This has been, with the exception of Warren G. Harding, this has been the age of the expansion of the state and the destruction of currencies. Okay, so when I look at it from a historical point of view, I don't see much good that came out of it. What came out of it? The Communist Revolution, the Nazis, the Holocaust, okay, the destruction of the gold standard. That's what came out of it. So when I look at it, and I know a lot of conservatives will criticize me because I'm not as anxious, I suppose, on the military side as others, but I look at it, I just see a disaster.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with you that decisions should be made at the lower level, but I think you'd agree with me that there's a considerable inertia against doing that sort of thing, because it's ingrained in our society that, except for maybe with sports, that when you get into the workforce, you're told that you don't know anything, right? And that's, I mean, I'm sure if I worked for you and came to you and said I made a decision about some money, you'd probably have a problem with that. So, and I think typically too, people work their way up, so people at the top usually have some experience. My question to you is, do you think that making decisions at the top is always a bad thing?
No.
And how do you shift that inertia to making decisions at a lower level, since it's so ingrained, you know, moving things up? You know what I mean?
Okay, now I'll go into a little bit of the economic theory. I frankly believe that the size of businesses is much larger than it ought to be, and I'll tell you why. Because of the expansion of credit by the Federal Reserve that allows big businesses to borrow money where small businesses can't. One of the things that we're finding out right now is that small businessmen cannot get loans from these banks. Banks are nervous. I mean, they're nervous. Why? Because they've been burned. When you expand the money, And this is one of the problems that happens. You get these mergers. Well, these people can go, they're the big corporation, they can go to the Federal Reserve and they can borrow several $billions and buy up a lot of little companies. And the size of the business then becomes dependent not on its service to its customers, but it becomes dependent on the infusions of credit that it can get in the New York markets, or in the markets. So I think that in a sense, if we were to return to a gold standard, which is what I know has to happen, I think you'd see the size of businesses become smaller, much more customer orientated, because they would not be depending on credit, they'd be depending upon the customer to make the decisions. And I think you're seeing that with General Motors. I mean, General Motors is becoming smaller. It's got too big. And so, in a sense, I think you have to let the market dictate to see where the decisions are made. Now, I'll give an example. I hired, when I was at Walsh College, I had 50 teachers underneath me. I did not dictate to those teachers what they were teaching class. I hired people who were good, and I said, I trust you. And we had a department that ran like a Swiss watch. The new administration came in, and they've got all these bureaucratic details, they're having meetings all the time, whatever else. So it was a relief to be a U of D. I had one faculty meeting a year, that's it. Okay? Every week, they're sitting around doing what? Doing this. Okay? Because they want to control everything. And I think Reagan was a genius in management because he hired good people, and what did he do? He let them do their thing. And that's the problem. The more of this you get, the more overhead you have, the more expensive your product's going to be and the less competitive you're going to be, because when people have ownership, miracles happen. Okay, and so to get that level of ownership down, I mean, if I said to you, I'd like you to teach a class for me. Here's the syllabus, here's the books, here's what you're going to say, here's the test. You don't have ownership. I said, I want you to teach this class in financial or whatever you're an expert in. Now you have ownership. You'll invest in it, you'll make it better, you'll be proud of it. Okay, so I don't know if that answers your question exactly, because there's no mathematical formula that does it, but that's the sense where I'd be coming from.